Good evening, and welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam. We've been getting more into the namesake of the show lately, and I kind of appreciate that on a certain level, because a lot of times this show just becomes news because there's so much shit I have to watch. But I've been able to do more rewatches lately, and then it can fall into the purview of the show. Because it's like, if it's just me ranting about current events items, it's like, alright, well, how many other shows are doing this exact same thing? The answer's a lot. So, here we are. It is Monday, November 7th, 2022. We are 5 days away from the premiere of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. So, it seems fitting. Now, I was going to have Josie on for this, but she's been busy, so we weren't going to do that. And getting Peter to watch a Marvel movie is not something that he's going to do. So, here I am talking about Black Panther on my own. Because I realized as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I think I've only seen this movie in its entirety twice, and that was when I saw it opening night, and then I saw it again with my brother the second time. I think those are the only two times that I saw this movie in its entirety. And I feel like there's a lot to talk about with this movie, looking back on it and what it was compared to how we, remember it. The movie did make a fuck ton of money. I mean, it made, $1.3 billion, which is not terrible. Like, there are some things in the movie that were questionable, visually mostly. Like, a lot of the effects do not hold up as well. And it's the same thing where, like, if you go back and watch any of the Marvel movies, with the exception of possibly, like, Infinity War and Endgame, if you go back and watch any of the Marvel movies, the effects aren't exactly stellar. I don't think anyone's making the case that these movies age as well as Avatar, but it is kind of like, looking back at it, I don't think that, what's it called? I don't think that I don't think that the movie, visually ages. Like, if you go back and watch The Avengers, there are a lot of sequences that don't look great, that maybe looked better in our memory, or, like, maybe comparing them to... We can't put the genie back in the bottle for what movies look like now. So, invariably, we're going to look at it, and we're going to communicate that the movie looks different now compared to then. And I just don't know if compared to 2012 standards it looks quite the same. And the reason why I say all this is because if you go back and watch Black Panther, there is quite a bit in this movie that definitely looks better in your head, remembering back on what the movie was compared to what it actually was. And I remember watching it initially, and I think it was probably the second time I saw it, where I was like, this fight sequence that happens in the third act doesn't look the best, and, like, there is a certain weird look to the entire sequence with, in the casino, and it doesn't quite look as well. Like, it is a tracking shot, and that is pretty cool, but I don't think it quite looks as nice as it was, like what it could have been. And I think that's a big part of it, where it's like, look, we know what this could have looked like, and it just doesn't look that way. But the thing is, it's like, the production design is still top notch. It is still some of the best production design that Marvel has ever done in the history of, Marvel Studios. Like, the way Wakanda is built and everything that goes into it, the technology, like the visual style of the technology and all of that looks great. And the costuming is all fantastic, and they do a lot of great work there. I just think that it doesn't look the visual effects in a lot of cases don't look as good as modern standards, which, I mean, granted, it's been 4 years, but still, things have changed a little bit. I think the movie, like, if that's the biggest complaint I have coming out of it, that would be one thing. I feel like the movie is kind of buoyed by Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan's performances. And it's not just, I mean, the performances all around are great. Like, Lupita Nyong'o is great, and what's her name, too? Letitia Wright, and Angela Bassett, and Winston Duke, and even Daniel Kaluuya has a few really great moments in his very small role. And like, Ulysses Claw really just, you know, he's just fun whenever he's on the screen. But, like, I feel like a lot of the plan as it's going doesn't make a ton of sense. So, like, he goes and, like, I'm not entirely sure. Like, looking at, you know, his plan, specifically the plan of, what's it called? The plan of, the fuck's his name? Of Killmonger. Like, he wants to get into Wakanda so he can go and fight T'Challa, defeat T'Challa, and take the throne that way. As is, you know, ritual combat is how they decide who has the throne of Wakanda. And it's like, number one, like, a lot of the movie could have just been skipped once he has found Claw. If the plan is just to bring Claw to the border and be like, oh, hey, by the way, remember that guy who stole all your vibranium, like, in the 90s? Well, here he is. Like, that's one of those things where it's like, well, why wasn't that just plan A? Like, you found Claw, kill Claw, bring him, like, why do we need to get through an entire sequence at a, what's it called, where he's dealing with the what's I'm looking for here? He, like, in the casino in Korea, where he's trying to sell more vibranium to the CIA, and then Claw gets captured, and then has to be broken out by Killmonger. Like, and this is after Killmonger helps him with the heist in the museum, and it's like, it's all cool, you know, a lot of it's cool set pieces, but the connective tissue between them is not exactly the strongest. And looking at, you know, what this could possibly mean going forward, like, I don't quite understand why we needed to do all those extra steps. I'm not entirely sure why these additional kind of, like, half steps in between were really necessary, when the end game of the plan, for lack of a better word, is just, well, we're going to kill Claw and use his body as the leverage to get into the, what's it called, to get into Wakanda. Like, that's kind of the thing. And then the question I have is, like, okay, so he was born in Wakanda, like, he was born in the United States, he's half Wakandan, and it's his dad, and it's like, but, like, why did they have to keep it a secret? They don't really explain that either, and I think that them keeping it a secret is kind of the biggest plot point of the movie, because it, like, if it's not kept a secret that, you know, the brother had the son, and they brought the son back, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this, you know, this happened, but we're gonna bring him back to his home where he deserves to be. Like, there are a lot of questions that go along to that. Like, why was that not part of, you know, him going to Oakland? Like, okay, well, we'll bring him back. Like, okay, but, like, who was the mother? Where was the mother? Like, you know, why didn't they go to the mother and be like, oh, hey, by the way, hi, we're dignitaries from a foreign country, and you stole something from us? Like, I feel like that's a valid question that could have been answered, that, like, would have streamlined that aspect of the story, because it's like, well, like, what's the situation here where why they can't do that? And I'm not entirely sure they ever explained that. There was... Now, the reason why I bring up Black Panther in this regard is not only because I want the nice, sweet SEO optimization that comes from Black Panther coming out in theaters this week, and they're doing a double feature as well. I also would like to be able to talk about where they go from here with Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever is coming out on Thursday. I'm going Friday because I couldn't get in Thursday night. And I am looking at it is a 2 hour and 41 minute long movie, which is great because the last time a movie came out in November from Marvel that was over 2.5 hours long, it was not exactly the best received movie that they've put out. I really liked it, but it doesn't mean, that means jack shit apparently. So, all of that said, with this coming, and it, why the fuck did I go this way? As I sit here in traffic, why the fuck did I go this way? I think that what we are dealing with is a movie that they were not prepared to have to really make. And I mean, no one thought that, they would lose Chadwick Boseman between 1 and 2. And the plot originally for 2 was him mourning the loss of the 5 years and then Namor showing up. And apparently Namor has been the plan for the sequel. Since this movie was written, they ended up cutting the post-credit scene before production that would have teased Namor as the villain in the second one. But all of that notwithstanding, I'm not entirely... that was always the plan, was to have him go up against Namor. In this case, it will not be T'Challa, because T'Challa is being killed off between movies. There are a few things that need to happen here that are going to be a little strange, because I'm assuming they're not CG recreating T'Challa. Number one, if it is Shuri as the Black Panther, picking up and taking the mantle from here, which I think is a safe bet. If I'm being honest, I think that's the safest bet for what's going to happen in this movie. It's that Shuri is going to assume the mantle of the Black Panther going forward. The issue is this whole thing with the ancestral plane, which admittedly I had completely forgotten about until I rewatched this movie this last weekend. The ancestral plane is where she meets with the person who... she meets with someone who is going to be the one who's going to, talk them through, and they're going to go and talk to whoever it is. T'Challa, both times, goes back and talks to his dad. And T'Chaka, who died in Civil War. When Killmonger goes into the ancestral plane, he talks to his father. He talks to N'Jobu, the what's it called? The person who, his father, who was killed by T'Chaka in the 90s in Oakland. Now, if it's Shuri, and it's Shuri taking over, and that was going to be the case from the beginning, I feel like the way this scene would have been written, where she goes to the ancestral plane, which again, not entirely sure how they're going to get the power of the Black Panther in the situation, because if that's the case, that they're going to get the power of the Black Panther through this. The heart-shaped herb was destroyed by Killmonger, except for the one that they used to repower T'Challa at the end of the movie. And looking at this whole situation, I think that if they were to do this later on down the line, where they would have put... I think it was a foregone conclusion that she was going to end up the one who was going to be as the Black Panther at the end of the movie, at the end of this, at the end of his story. When they do eventually kill him off, Shuri was going to assume the mantle. And I feel like what they were going to do was going to be have the person in the ancestral plane that she talks to not be her, not be T'Chaka, but be T'Challa, who had passed. Now, you can't do that now unless they're going to CG, composite together T'Challa, which I don't think that would be well received if that was the case. Which leaves it, is she going to also talk to T'Chaka? Or is she going to talk to, Killmonger? because, what's his name was at the premiere. Michael B. Jordan. So I think that's kind of an interesting question that they have to kind of grapple with here. Granted, there is an answer, and people have seen the movie and know the answer to this question. I have not, so I'm just speculating. The other thing is, I'm a little bit concerned about, look, it's 2 hours and 41 minutes. I'm not diminishing the runtime. And look, do I think that, it's likely that they're going to handle it great? I think it's a possibility. But look, I had this same misgiving going into Batman v Superman, and I don't want to give one the benefit of the doubt over the other. Granted, I have more confidence in Ryan Coogler as a filmmaker than I do in Zack Snyder, and I think that my lack of faith in Zack Snyder has kind of been proven accurate since Batman v Superman, and I think that my assertion on Batman v Superman was proven accurate. That said, I think that looking back on where we are with this movie, and where this movie kind of stands as an entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have a lot going on here, because the only indication that there is another civilization under the water is one line in Enye. There's the one line where it's like there's tectonic activity under the Indian Ocean or something like that, and that's the only indication that there is something resembling Atlantis. So look, they gotta acknowledge and deal with all of that, and they have to set all that up. I don't expect grappling with the death of T'Challa, and by extension Chadwick Boseman, will take an unsubstantial amount of time. That's going to take up a good amount of screen time in this movie. Because if they didn't, people would not be happy. And if they don't pay enough of a respect, you're going to have that issue. I wouldn't be surprised even if the Marvel Studios logo is the one they use for Black Panther, where it's all footage of T'Challa. I feel like that's kind of an issue that they need to grapple with for this movie, is all of that. On top of that, there's also the arrival of there's also the issue of we're introducing Riri Williams in this movie for the first time, and no one has dealt with this character before. This character doesn't exactly have the deepest of what's it called, of a character history as it stands, because the character is relatively new. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that you can't go into this movie with the same level of expectation that people will know who you're talking about that you would for other Marvel movies, where it's like you can go in and you can kind of flub the details on some characters for other things, but I think that for the sake of Riri Williams, it's not like it's Tony Stark's daughter or Rhodey's daughter. It's an entirely new character with an entirely new backstory who is now doing this. I think the way they're going to move past this quickly is they're going to say that she is one of the people who was working, one of the kids at the Youth Outreach Center who had gone to Wakanda. And I feel like that's how they're going to do it, because at the end of the movie, when we do have Shuri and T'Challa go to Oakland, and they have opened the new facility, I feel like that's going to be the origin of Riri Williams, is that she went there to that youth center and then, learned science and all of that with the Wakandans, and then becomes, Ironheart in that regard, and is also inspired by Tony Stark in the same way. And that's the other thing that I think that this movie is going to have to grapple with, is that Ironheart is very much tied to Tony Stark in this regard. Like, because that's the thing, is that it's like she saw Tony Stark, she wants to be Tony Stark, she built her armor to look like Tony Stark. Like, her armor, like the Iron Heart, like, she's taking on the moniker based on Iron Man. And again, look, it's probably gonna be delved into more in her own, you know, solo show on the Disney Plus, but it's not exactly, you know, they're not gonna have enough time to really build that here. So I would anticipate very quick introduction to Ironheart, and I also anticipate she's not going to have a huge impact on the role, on the plot. It is an interesting thing that they have to grapple with, though, in this movie. And then I feel like the other thing is, based on where, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, before the death of Chadwick Boseman. I've definitely told people in real life. I just have to get better about saying it on the podcast. When it comes to where this is going, I think you're building a case for a third movie being a fight against M'Baku. And I think that that's where this was headed from the beginning. Because I think the issue that we have here is M'Baku is from the mountain tribe that separated out from the other 4 tribes of Wakanda and kind of was its own thing. So when it comes time for them to do the coronation, and it's like, does anyone want a challenge? And then all of a sudden M'Baku comes down and he's like, hi, we have a right to challenge too, we do want to challenge. And he, you know, and T'Challa's like, alright, well, we'll do the challenge. And T'Challa ends up winning after he yields. But the issue becomes, you know, they get his help later in the movie, and a lot of his people die. And a lot of Wakandans die, too, in Black Panther. Then comes, you know, okay, we're opening up to the world. And by and large, like, Nakia is open to opening up Wakanda, and I think maybe she speaks for her segment of the population too, but I don't know how much that reflects on the rest of Wakanda. And I feel like the way that you go through this story from here should be, we opened up, and shit went horribly wrong. And and look, we had this war, we opened up, you know, and, you know, because we were so entangled in outside things, that kind of happens. Then comes Infinity War and Endgame, where it's like, we opened up and helped, and people died. A lot of people died. And it's like, well, why? Like, was it necessary that they had to die? And it's like, well, I mean, you can make the case, not really, because we didn't have to accept the Avengers showing up and being like, hey, can we just, hang out here for a little bit, because Thanos is coming, we gotta, it's like, look, you can sit here and make all of the explanations that you want, but at the end of the day, like, all of that amounted to nothing. Half the universe died, and then you ended up going, like, you did defeat him, but, that was not here. And then the Wakandans showed back up for that fight, too, and a bunch died there, too. And at the end of the day, considering it came down to Tony Stark doing what he did and making his sacrifice, all of that battle, like, someone who's an isolationist could make these leaps and bounds in their mind about that. And if that's the case, then I think you could end up where M'Baku is coming at this from, it's like, look, every time we open up over the last, 10, 15 years, shit went horribly wrong. And look, we have this thing where it's like the vibranium is at risk again, and we have, that is what makes Wakanda different and special and great, is their vibranium and their knowledge of how to use vibranium. And if that's the case, and we have all of this going on, and we have to deal with all of that, now we have this situation where they've opened back up to the world, and if that's the case, where we're going to be living in this reality, where every time we open up, a war happens, and every time a war happens, Wakandans die, and they didn't have to die, is the key thing, where it's like, if we just stayed isolated, none of that would have happened, and it wouldn't be our problem. If that's the case, you can have a strong case for isolationism on a pretty simple level. And that is where you can get these competing ideologies. And it's like, look, we know as the audience that it is a it was an important sacrifice, and they did kind of the right thing by opening up, because at the end of the day, it did end up successful, and everything worked out. But for people living in that situation where this kind of thing didn't happen on a weekly basis, where it's like there was one substantial incident that we've heard about, and it appears that now we're going to have this history with Mr. Nimbus in the world of Atlantis. Like, if that's going to be the case, where we're going to have this difference of how things work, I can see the case that could be made where that would be the case. Now, I don't know if that has the same impact without T'Challa in the lead and really spearheading it, which is why there's also the case to be made that the movie's going to end up with Nakia as the Black Panther, which would be my pick. That would be my pick. I think that Shuri is a little on the young side to take on that mantle. I don't think she's quite... I mean, we saw her fight quite a bit in Black Panther and in Infinity War and Endgame, really, more than anything else. But I think that there's definitely a case to be made that Nakia would be better, both thematically, as for what she stands for in terms of the geopolitics of Wakanda, as well as the larger role going forward. Like, I think that when you watch Black Panther, like the role Shuri plays, she's kind of the quartermaster. She's Q from 007. She is, here are the cool weapons that you're going to have and the cool technology things that you're going to have that are going to help you out throughout this mission. You're going to need this stuff, and here's how all of it works. Like, that's her first scene in the movie, where it's like her first real scene where she's showing the suit and showing all of that to T'Challa. Like, having her build the stuff and then also and have her act that way, like, unless they're going to make her into Tony Stark, which, again, if we're going to do that, I think we're running the risk of having too many characters like that. I think you're better off just keeping her in that role off to the side, and then also as backup muscle in that case, and make Nakia into the Black Panther, or alternatively, the new character that Michaela Coelho is playing, because that, if she becomes the Black Panther, you get a ton of fodder for future stories, because then you get the question of, who the fuck is this lady? Why is she given this great ancestral responsibility and honor, and why is that the case? That's another place where you can go and it's like, oh, this is fantastic storytelling right here, and you can do a lot with that. I hope it is, I just feel like making Shuri at this juncture of the Black Panther is, and having her in that role for the long term, is kind of a misstep at this juncture and where the story is. I feel like we don't have the character developed enough for her to take on that role and have it be like, okay, well, T'Challa's entire arc is him learning responsibility and learning to balance that with being a king and all of that, and I would like to see a further development of this character before she takes on this giant earth-shattering change, paradigm shift for her. But we'll wrap up there for today. Black Panther does come out this Friday. I will be seeing it on Friday, and you can hear a review of it on Beware of Spoilers on Friday. So until then, have a great rest of your week.